So let's talk money. That's the next session. I'm going to have 4 persons up here and that's the introduction. Money is not the issue, so that's promising. We'd like to hear more about that. And I would like to ask Marcus Roberts to come up here first. Marcus, where are you? There are you. You're with Settles?
I am indeed, yes.
Yes, please. Is money not an issue? Maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit more about your...
Yeah, absolutely. Marcus Roberts, I head up the student housing team at Savills. We operate in the UK and
what is Savills?
Savills is a real estate advisory organisation with a global reach, covering all aspects of commercial and residential real estate. I specialise in the student housing sector and university education partnerships, and predominantly my business has been in the UK for the last 10-12 years. Certainly with the way the market across the globe has changed in the last couple of years, so investor interest has been sort of looking to shift into the European market. And what we've seen over that period of time has been, I think, we've been a lot of talk about the international students and the growth of that particular area. The mobilisation of students wanting to study in the US, UK, and I think certainly starting to have a focus on that.
How big a business is it for you? Is it a big business?
I think the sector as a whole is big. It's certainly sort of emerged over the last sort of 10 years and is an asset class in its own right, and that has certainly been helped by, I think, the establishment of the sector in the US. Many sort of private equity organisations converting into REITs, and then institutional investors. So that's pension funds, propcos. Looking to develop platforms in the UK.
And that's international, or is it mostly UK?
My work is predominantly in the UK.
But you see several similar developments in other markets?
Yes, absolutely, yes. And certainly what we are seeing is international interest in from investors from the US down to Australia, all points in between, looking at focusing on this particular segment, because it's very much seen as a sort of counter-cyclical.
So let's assume that I would like to develop a 200 to 300 unit development on Science Park here in Amsterdam with some facilities and great hourly rates, and then a 7% return on investment. You can deliver the money.
Yeah, I think. I think
I'll get you my bank account.
Absolutely. I think putting the like any jurisdiction, I mean, putting sort of planning issues and other political issues to one side. There is significant interest in Amsterdam as a city, as there is in, I would say, probably at least 10 cities in 10 university cities in the Netherlands, probably the sort of top 20, top 30 university cities in France, and then the same in Germany. And that money is very much sort of coming from private equity organisations, as I say, particularly sort of the US. We've recently sold a couple of portfolios in the UK to US equity. They were looking to establish a UK platform to then sort of leapfrog into the European market.
Okay. And why Amsterdam? Is there a good reason to go for Amsterdam?
Yeah, I think much has been said about the fact that it sits at it's got a very good international brand that probably hasn't been sort of pushed enough in terms of its the university space.
Do you see the red tape that the Deputy Mayor was talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, we touched on this last night, and that, to be honest with you, is the biggest hurdle that we're facing. And it's understanding the point system, the planning system.
Is that hard?
Yeah.
Just for the ones who don't know, that there's a point system in which projects get points awarded, and according to that you can charge rent, right?
Yes, that's right. And I believe there's a ceiling of €360 plus then utilities on top. But then it's then the rental growth beyond that.
Yeah.
Actually, sort of some investors, that's where they sort of really look to make their returns. There are easier jurisdictions that where sites and investments can actually be acquired and repositioned to make those returns quicker than actually going through the hoops here in the Netherlands.
Okay. Can I ask Bowen Delaport to join us? Hello? Yeah, okay, good morning. There's water there if you want to. Hello? Sorry. So, we have a nice proposition of you. I just explained the program, 200 to 300 units, science park, facilities.
Yeah, maybe I could say 2 words by my company.
Of course, go ahead.
Just to explain who I am, where I come. Obviously, I come from France, so I did the system, the Grande École. So I entered Grande École, then I did nothing. So I'm here to explain nothing.
But you had quite a social life, I hope.
Yeah,
Was good?
big
was
social
good.
life.
Yeah, good experience.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So I'm part of Gessina, which is a real estate investment company listed in Paris. We are mainly focusing on the office market, Parisian and French office market, with 7 billion euros in assets in office. Then in residential for 2 billion assets, and in healthcare products like nurse schools, mainly, and private hospitals for 1 billion. And we developed we try to develop the student housing sector, which is very small right now. It's like a startup within a big company, because we try to refocus and to regrab some yield from this kind of residential.
Yeah.
For us, it's a residential product before everything, and we are moving from the classic residential to healthcare and student.
There are some pictures over there for slides.
Okay. So the ideal program for us, we're only focusing in France right now because we have only 9 residents, which is 1,500 beds. And the ideal program would be, yes, between around 300 beds for us. Okay. Why not 400? First thing, it will be very difficult to explain that to French politicians. Okay. Because many of them, they are, when they are thinking about student housing, they are thinking about problems, parties, and
they're correct. Yeah.
No, not really. Okay. We try to explain that they are not correct.
Sorry.
But it's our pitch. And if you put too many students in one place, it won't work for them. So, but on a financial point of view, if you want to propose services, to propose facilities, and to have a good place in the city or outside the city on campus, you need, for us, to integrate our management or fees, you need at least 250, 300, 400. And it can work. We have example. We always take the example of the UK, where you have huge, massive residences, and to explain them, it can work if there is proper management, someone there, which is responsible for this center of profit. It can work.
Absolutely. I think certainly sort of picking up on that. Yeah, in the UK, 300 to 400 beds is the ideal. There's a lot of it, and we do have schemes up to 1,300, 1,400 beds in scale. However, I think one thing that we've seen in Europe is that there hasn't been the establishment of a brand. Yeah. It's been very fragmented in terms of its investment to date.
So the idea that there is a brand Europe-wide that says this is the Marriott or the whatever, or the
label.
Label. Yeah. No, I mean, we've seen that in the UK. That's only been developed over the last 12 years, where the main operators have been the likes of Unite, IQ, the likes of Liberty Living as well, who will sort of pride themselves with a particular service sort of provision to the students. I think that is something that will, over the period of time, be developed across Europe.
And you don't have red tape in France, of course. So it's not a big issue here.
No issue.
It doesn't bother you.
Money from the government is growing.
Very strong crops where I see it's one of those areas of low-hanging fruit.
Yes, yes. Let's get serious again. So is red tape a burden on your business?
There is a law under discussion right now to kind of something I discovered here in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And we have something under discussion. Maybe the managed residences, so not only for students but for old people and so on, will be outside this law with a specific scheme for the rents. But it's under discussion, and we try to explain as a private company, private actor, but we are very, very few in France. I mean, we didn't say that before, but France market for student housing is very, very fragmented. It's mainly, first of all, when you see the private part of the market, it's mainly a developer, a tax scheme, unit by unit market. And we are, I would say, right now we are only 3 actors in France, French one. Some foreigners are coming, and it's good to explain to the politicians, to the mayors, even to the universities that you have to offer the broad range of rooms. But right now, there is a law under discussion, and we are lobbying to put aside the student housing to explain you have to propose everything.
As we said, a separate status.
Exactly. A new kind of asset class. You cannot say that to a politician,
no.
but that's the idea.
So we asked Daniel Piazzolo to join us now. Welcome. And you are excited about, first of all, explain who you are and what you do.
Yes. So IPD is a company, we sort of get data from the different investors worldwide. So worldwide we have data from 1,500 different portfolios of end investors like insurance companies like Allianz, AXA, Generali, but also pension funds or open-end funds who want to see how they perform relative to the others. Since of course it's difficult in the real estate area, how good was the return, and therefore you need a benchmark.
Okay. And what's your role in that company?
And I'm responsible within Germany for the area of Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And we sort of have also some data as an IPD for student housing, and I brought some few slides.
Yes.
I did a presentation first when yesterday I arrived with 20 slides and I got the message yesterday evening, cut it down to 6 slides, and now these are the six slides. If you want the other 14 slides, just give me a business card. So first, the student housing in the UK. Of course, the UK is an important market for student housing, and you see on this little map, it's not only London, it's in the different areas. And we have the data from different participants. Altogether, in the year 2012, the total return is 12%, 12.6%, and the total return is what the end investor gets, having 2 components. On the one hand, the income return, so what you get in rent.
Which is about, in percentage?
Like 5%.
5%?
In the year 2012 in the UK. And then you have, on the other hand, capital growth, how much the value has increased. And in the UK, it was 7.4%,
which
in the year
gets to
2012.
12%.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So if you go to the next slide, you see for 3 years, the performance of the student housing, that's the red line, and the green line is the residential. So you see that in last 2 years there's an outperformance of student housing, but not in every year. So you don't have a guarantee that you have an outperformance concerning relative to residential, but it looks quite good in the last 2 years. So that's for the important market UK. But then it's interesting, the next slide is Sweden. And in Sweden, we have data for a lot of years. But in the year 2012, you see the different markets where we have information from different student housing, and there the return, the total return is 5%, only 5%, meaning income return is 4.7%, and capital growth is below inflation rate.
Yeah.
So also
that's not good.
you don't have a guarantee, as I said, you don't have a guarantee that you always have good performance.
Just what's the reason for such a low number?
Then you can't have a guarantee that always the capital growth will positive. That always there's
But
a
what's the
demand.
main reason? I'm pretty sure that there was not the model they started out when they did the investment. What's the main reason for that low capital gain?
That there, I think especially in Sweden, that you had a certain hype in the years before,
Okay.
where capital growth was quite really high.
Okay.
And that you see in the next slide.
So the investments were mostly too high.
There other participants were prepared to pay quite a high price,
Okay.
and therefore the capital growth was really
All
high.
right, that's clear.
And then you see in the next slide, so Sweden is the ideal case for us as IPD, since we have a long time frame going back to 1998. And yet there you see in the blue scale always the income, the capital growth. So in many years the capital growth was really high, and you have some years, also for example 2008, where capital growth was negative. So it's important you don't have the guarantee that's always 5% income return and always the capital growth is higher than inflation.
So again, so I understand, is that a matter of the valuation of the property that makes such a big difference? Is there optimism in the market? Is what drives these major fluctuations?
Yes. So from the investor point of view, of course, it's important that you have once a year an assessment what's the value of the property,
Right.
and for that you need a valuation,
Yeah.
and of course the valuation should be close to the market transactions.
Yeah.
But of course you don't sell and buy properties each year, so you need a market participant to say the value of the property is that high, and the market participants, like the valuers, would say the other trades that taken leads to that we have to decrease the value for this year, for example.
This is it's a case of honest appraisers.
Yes, and
That's an old concept.
it should be, in most cases, it's external valuers who say best knowledge, the value is this. But of course, it's a certain art and not a deep science.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that, certainly we've seen the UK market in particular over the last sort of 10 years has matured. There have been a greater number of transactions. We're probably looking at sort of between £2 and £3 billion of assets traded over the last couple of years. I think in Europe there just hasn't been that level of transaction, and that's so we're very much sort of starting from a base where the UK was 12, 15 years ago. We've developed a methodology for valuation that colleagues here will be then sort of looking to try and sort of translate that into the European
And you
market.
see those fluctuations as well? The major fluctuations?
Yeah, I think as with all markets here, everything can go up and down. But I think what we've seen in the UK is a steady rental growth over those past few years, that probably between sort of 5 and 7% sort of on average across the UK.
Yes. So then, next slide, please. There in the next slide, you see this comparison between the income return. So that's the income return, just the rent you get back. And there you really see this kind of steady outperformance for the Swedish markets, 1998 to 2012. And so that's I think the beauty for the investor, that you have this kind of certain high income return relative to residential. And I think especially, let's say, like for an insurance company, like for pension funds, this income return is a really important component. And there, I think it's really interesting that for a market like Sweden, where we have data for 15 years, you have this kind of good high income return, but you also see how it's sort of declining in the Swedish market.
Right.
So in that respect, there's also not the guarantee in markets that now open up for institutional investors, that you always have this fantastic high return, like in Sweden in the beginnings of the so-called of get the data. But altogether, I think the clear message is you can expect a higher income return than in residential.
Okay.
And then the last slide, with the data, there we sort of compare where we have information from always more than 10 different participants for UK, Sweden and France, and you see also for France that we have a good performance over the last 3 years, where we have data where the total return in these markets are higher in the student housing than in the residential housing.
So what's orange and what is green?
Orange is student housing, green is residential, so you have this clear outperformance. for student housing, and that's the last slide with data. And now the very last slide, that's of the conclusion, and there I think you have this current attractiveness of the student housing, you have this kind of outperformance in income return, and the very last line is, I think it's important for the market that we have enough data to increase transparency, also in markets like in Germany, like in Netherlands. So I would hope that at the end this house agrees we need more data.
Okay, sure. And if you come back to your board after this meeting, and come to investors in Stockholm, you tell them in Sweden to tell them invest in Amsterdam?
I think, as we discussed the whole morning, it's an area that has become more established. So it's going away from the niche into this kind of main market. So more investors think about investing in student housing, and of course, then you have to look within Europe. What are the different areas? And of course, I think it's important to look at the different possibilities and then different risks in the different markets, as we discussed.
Okay. So then I would like to ask Matthias Thomas to come forward. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, how are you?
Oops, sorry.
I discovered that you best sit here, and I'm not standing in the way of any persons from the audience. So, first of all, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you can contribute to this discussion.
Well, maybe I'm the party pooper.
Okay, okay. Yeah, well, we need that too, so that's okay.
I work for INREF, which is kind of the European Association for Investors in Non-Listed Real Estate Vehicles. So we represent investors and fund managers as well as advisors. We represent where the money comes from. And before I joined INREF, I was working first of all for IPD, and I was working for a German university as a professor for real estate management. So I was, let's say, responsible in part for the demand side for student housing.
Okay. Now the German realism.
German realism. If everybody talks about investments being a good deal, maybe it isn't a good deal at all. So
Okay.
I'm a bit, let's say, concerned about talking about a hype, and too much, let's say, or not enough thinking about how the world could change in a different way. So let's assume that the Asian markets, the Asian education market will pick up, which is now responsible for a large extent of importing students to Europe. Let's assume that the quality of Asian education improved significantly, and that all of a sudden European and US students want to go to Asia. So how will this impact the market here in Europe? So is this student housing a model that will work all over Europe in a broader sense, or in very select markets?
So I understand that argument, but I think I also hear that, especially in Holland, that it is also a sleeping opportunity. So that's, you warn us against more competition, and I think that's a fair warning.
I mean, if you look at Daniel's numbers, I mean, we saw the markets demonstrated that yes, there is an outperformance of student housing relative to residential, but as long as you don't believe in concepts like free lunch, why do you get higher returns? Because you can take more risk.
Mm-hmm.
So, the part.
Show you. No, you're doing a very good job.
Thank you.
But we're trying to let's see if we can get them in a different mood set. If the fact is true, and I think it's true, that it is a sleeping opportunity in the sense that we never really thought about student housing as an interesting investment opportunity for non-public organizations. Isn't that correct? I mean, at least there is some gain to be made.
Don't get me wrong. I think academic education is of utmost importance. I'm not sure if every study offering actually has its merit for the purpose of today. I was looking at the most obscure bachelor programs you can do. I came about
In Amsterdam?
no, all around Europe. You can do a bachelor, for example, in bioenergy. You can do a bachelor in equestrian science.
Okay.
You can do a bachelor, that was extremely interesting, mentoring in the health sector. So I was wondering if actually there is sufficient demand for every study offering, and if there will be not a differentiation between universities.
Which is an argument for joining, concentrating
Quality.
quality.
I mean, you have to have, I think if you look at student housing and making student housing into an institutional investment class, it only works in the top universities, and which have a very stable inflow of students and have the support either from the local governments or from their endowments. If you look at US models, stable financial situation.
Okay.
I mean, I think from the investors' perspective, I mean, they are certainly the research that they will be looking for on a particular city will be focusing on the number of domicile, the students of that jurisdiction, international students, postgraduates, and certainly the quality and the courses that particular university or universities in that city are offering, not just on a sort of European basis, but certainly sort of globally as well, whether they have sort of global recognition in equestrianism or whatever it may be, that actually that makes them stand out as being, that's where the sort of potential sort of demand will rise from. Yeah.
And I would like to add with this investors, I mean, they want to invest in real estate, and of course we know with offices it's really difficult. You can see it here in Amsterdam to get a good return. Where retail is
Difficult is an understatement. It's a disaster. But go ahead.
Yeah, retail, let's say with this idea of this internet economy where maybe people will order 90% of what they need per computer. Retail is difficult, and then you have more or less a residential there, but residential has a low income return, and then you have other former niches like healthcare, like student housing, and in that respect I think it's important that the institutional investors think about investing into student housing or healthcare.
But, big but.
And yes.
Think of market size, think of liquidity, think of your exit, and think about why Jessina is only why you are investing only in France. Why is there no pan-European platform? How do you get scale outside?
But not yet. So I think events like today are important to establish something on a European scale.
I mean, there are. I mean, there's a UK operator, Crosslane, who have forged joint ventures in Germany and France with a fund as the exit. They've invested in a number of buildings in Germany, a couple of sites in France, and we'll be looking at certainly in the Netherlands as well. Try to use their UK experiences to what we're discussing at the initial start about sort of a brand and a that can be developed across across the European piece.
There are different aspects for us for Jessina. So we started in France because we are French. We had bad opportunities on other class of assets around Europe. So we said, okay, on that one, that new one, we will focus in France. And most of all, we say, okay, we want to be, first of all, strong in our country because there is demand.
That's your base. Yeah.
Grande école, big schools, universities. So we want to focus on that one. And then we want to be such an important partner to schools and universities to be able to expand across abroad, outside France, with them, maybe in the second term. It means that we try to work very closely with schools. I would say a word about universities because it's different in France, but always different. But we try to work very closely with these schools, which now are understanding that, okay, to develop myself, I have to attract foreign students, and to attract foreign students, I have to offer high quality courses, high quality education, of course, But within this education, there is the housing. And then with this partnership, okay, you want to expand yourself in Qatar, you want to expand yourself in Singapore, okay, we can be your partner, your next partner on the housing part.
So you said something very important. You seek partnership with the local university.
Local schools.
Local schools. What is their role for you? What will they do for you? What do you ask from them?
We, like I said at the beginning, we are very, very few private actors in France. So we are learning with the schools,
yeah.
and we try to explain them, to pitch them what can be the proposal, the housing proposal, within your education proposal.
Yes.
Okay, so what we
But
try.
are you asking them for guarantees?
Yeah.
Or are you
So what
asking-
we are beginning this work.
Okay.
We try. So right now, what we can do with schools, I mean engineering schools, business schools, we can guarantee them rooms during a certain period of time of the year, and after this date, okay, all the rooms are coming back to Campus A or Denmark, and we can sell
But then
them
you
to
ask
the
them
market.
for them to rent specifically those rooms or something like
No.
that, or guarantee it?
Not right now. There is no guarantee right now. We are talking with schools for to sign leases with the school, but for the time being we didn't succeed. It's too early in France.
But it would make your model work easier, and that would be a good reason for you to move to other territories.
Yeah.
Well, that's
That's
an
what we
important
think.
thing. So maybe we're going to ask the universities later on if they're willing to do that.
Yeah, and there are probably international universities who would be willing to do that as well, to ensure that they can secure the bed spaces. And you can't say in Paris, where you talk to some of the American universities, and they can't get their hands on anything, so they need to partner up with someone like a Jacina who can provide that.
Do you see that as important?
Definitely. I think the examples were cited. It's important that you have this of different contexts to get also then the demand. So I think it's pretty important.
So, going back to your point of the hype, are we that close to already being a hype? And we're just started discussing about that. You're way ahead of us. Thinking. That's a hard word.
Hard word.
Yeah.
Realism.
Yeah.
Realism.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
No, I think if you look at kind of the UK market, 12% kind of certainly kind of looks like kind of a great investment opportunity. If you look at 5.7% kind of in Sweden, I'm not so sure. At least kind of if you look at kind of 1 year. But if I may, I would just kind of like to get back to one point, which is kind of looking at the demand side. Kind of where do you kind of students come from? And is it kind of not kind of the most important kind of thing to work with universities that kind of they ensure that kind of teaching schedules kind of are kind of fully synchronized, that kind of all terms kind of start more or less around the same date, terms kind of end at kind of more or less the same date.
So this is part of his joining, working together.
Teaching kind of exams kind of are done in English, kind of that the results of kind of exams are kind of available kind of at the right moment to go back kind of to, or kind of go to a different university. Because kind of what I believe is that definitely kind of if you are a student, you in kind of both bachelor and masters, you should try to spend kind of at least a year abroad, and kind of that you should kind of not kind of do bachelor and master at the same university, but you should kind of be mobile, and you should kind of increase, let's say, kind of your network. So I believe kind of student housing is kind of then a way in order to, let's say, fulfill kind of the needs of kind of students. At the same time, I think you need to be kind of very careful kind of when investing in doing a proper due diligence.
That's how to do proper due diligence.
Yeah.
For example, in France right now, and I think that's one of the points of the discussion about transparency, about data, about market research. There are lots in the UK, I believe.
They're very good at
We are
that.
almost nowhere in France.
No,
We
same-
are all
same
doing, all the investors, even the private investors, individuals, they are all doing their their own due diligence, going to the competition to see how it works and so on. So there is nothing, there is no transparency on the market.
That's because that's where it's a relatively mature market. It's where the UK is. I mean, we have good data on domicile students, internationals, where they're living. Are they living at home? Are they living student halls of residence or elsewhere? That's something that we've sort of struggled to, a level of data that we can sort of compare the UK with France or Spain or Germany. It just isn't there. We can't.
This is a very important point. I mean, because of our discussion with Carolina, the mayor, later on in 3-4 months' time, this would be an important element on the list. Make sure that you make Amsterdam a transparent economy for this specific product, right?
Yes,
that's what.
But then also the community or the industry itself has to ensure that there is sort of this kind of market data available.
Mm.
So I think you can definitely increase the liquidity, that more money goes into a certain sector or a certain segment. If it's clear for the end investor or for a pension fund, what was the performance in the last years, what was the performance of the different national investments, and for that, I think also it's the duty of the industry to try to get more information on there. And IPD is a
As an investor, you want to get sort of first mover advantage and get the if you can get your hands on your own data that you believe in, then that's the advantage that you hold over the rest.
Yes,
of
but nonetheless you have an advantage if there's more transparency. Then other very conservative pension funds are willing to invest into that segment.
Exactly.
Then the liquidity.
You draw a different class of investors.
Yes. And certainly when we're coming to the sales of investments in sort of 2-3 years' time, say in France, that actually having that level of data is going to give somebody the comfort that the seed numbers are there.
Before this, we had a discussion, the hour before this, we had a discussion about the product. And also, I had the feeling that in this market, I know that in this market, product development has been very low. I mean, for all of you, do you see interesting products? Do you understand the product as it is offered? Or is it very vague at this moment what kind of product? Is there a big difference between the product? Is it clear what student housing is as a product?
I think that over the sort of 10 years in the UK, the product, the specification has changed dramatically from even sort of 6-bed or 8-bed cluster flats to sort of then probably 5 years down, say 2007, there was a drive towards studio accommodation because that drove a higher land value in a competitive marketplace when you were bidding on sites against the commercial and residential. I think now that things are sort of bedding down, and actually there's sort of moved back to probably more traditional cluster beds, sort of 80-20.
Bedding down.
Yeah, sorry. But I think in Europe, I think again it's a different model altogether. It's very much sort of studios.
It would be the advisor. He has decided to come to Amsterdam. He had a great deal with the university. What would your proposition be, your advice be on the product? Thinking about 10, 20 years ahead, what would your ideal product be?
Yeah, I think it's certainly in terms of looking at sort of a studio product, and I think
size, how big is that?
I guess in the UK they go down to sort of 16 square meters.
Okay.
But I think you're probably looking sort of 20 to 25.
Just so we understand, that's 4 by 4. That's this podium, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're in
But Wi-Fi.
51.
There's Wi-Fi. There is Wi-Fi.
I mean, just on that, I mean, I think top of all the sort of university or student servers.
And we still have a studio. 60 meters per meter. I'm still trying to grab 60 meters. And
Studio there.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the lower end. I mean, generally they tend to be sort of 20 to 25 square meters.
Okay.
And what you'll find on each floor is sort of a breakout area where communal room for that floor can actually sort of.
So how much units per communal area? How many beds?
It could be sort of 20
Yeah, okay.
per floor.
Higher up. So
Yeah, or it could be sort of dotted throughout the scheme. So it may not be one per floor, and maybe
Okay.
sort of. I mean, there's a scheme in London which is sort of typical of that, but has that mix.
Would you recognize that from your French experience?
We are just now we are coming to the student housing business from the classic standard residential business. So we know we have a figure out what could be the product. So that's why in our new residences we like to propose diversity. It means that studio, of course, it's 18 to 20 in France square meter.
Okay.
But co-location as well. So we are one of the only to do that. And we propose
So
2 beds,
so
3
for-
beds, co-location.
What does that mean,
It
co-location?
means that you have a small flat. For example, for 3 bedrooms, it will be 65 square meter with 3 bedrooms, and they share 1 bathroom and 1 kitchen.
Okay.
That's it. And in our Parisian residence, for example, we have 35 flats like this on duplex. So you have 2 bedrooms upstairs, 1 bedroom downstairs, with 1 kitchen and 3 fridges. Because there are 3 and they don't know each other. We have to work on that one, but
I would also.
that's interesting. We want to propose this kind of thing. It has 3 goals. I mean, we aim at 3 population with that. Many foreigners coming to France, they like this kind of accommodation because they can meet other guys immediately. That's exactly the same with French student coming from Marseille. They have to study in Lille.
Yeah, they have the same.
That's it.
Stressful
And
approach.
the third one is that financially it's less expensive than a studio.
Okay, concerning product type, from an investor point of view, I think it's definitely time to think about these kind of European student housing funds, since then the end investor, the conservative pension fund, has the opportunity to have a certain diversification within the fund. So it's not only dependent on one market and then maybe also on certain risks, let's say like from politicians, but then you have this kind of European diversification. So product-wise, I think that would be ideal. But looking at, for example, this property right here, that's a certain challenge, since then we as IPD would have to figure out, okay, do we put this into our collection of student housing or not really, since it's more like kind of a hotel. So, I mean, if it's not really pure student housing, then of course it's difficult for us kind of a data collector, but of course then it has a beauty that you have a certain diversification effect.
And there's a scheme in Bremen that Victoria Hall built, which is very much on the UK model of sort of 5-6 bed cluster flats, and that was sort of quite a departure from the standards of the German studios. But actually that lets very well year in, year out, and so that model can work.
Bremen, the Bremen example.
Yeah.
I think there's no one-size-fits-all model, so the clear recommendation is to ensure that your design is kind of cheap to be kind of rebuilt, because I mean 16 square meters, then how many units can you combine to create larger units, and
so the flexibility,
flexibility,
because transformation is important.
This, of course, I think if you have 2 stories, probably your complexity is a bit higher than if you go horizontally. But of course, with this kind of 65 square meters, in principle, you're opening up a new target group the moment you consider changing the use from student housing to, say, more traditional residential. So flexibility.
I would say, just to add 2 more words, part of the product definition for us, there is 2 other things, which are connectivity with transportation, connectivity to the city and to the school.
Public transportation,
or bicycles, like in Amsterdam. We give bicycles to the students in our residence to easily go to places in the city, to be part of the life of the city. It's one of our goals as well. And the last one is the idea of the one-stop shop, which is more and more important for the schools and for the students.
One-stop shop means
services around.
Okay.
It's not only Sleeping, eating,
a
it's
shop,
more.
a night shop, all that stuff that comes with that. School, sporting.
Yeah, but for example, one-stop shop is, I don't know, administrative, all the administrative package you need when you are a foreign student in France and you arrive in France, so we can offer that. So it's more than sleeping and eating, but it's part of the product for us.
In your model, you have to think about 2 showers. In my student house, 1 shower was permanently used to store the engine. So because somebody put it there and we forgot who it was, so we had only 1 shower. So it's always good to have a spare shower. Questions? Are there any questions? I mean, this is a great opportunity here. Your first person.
Hi there, Richard Betts from Property EU. One of the areas that's quite interesting is you talked about risks, Matthias. So, what are the risks that you see? Do you believe that there are higher risks over residential? And also, just a general question on in terms of investor appetite, why is there much more interest at the moment in student housing? What's driving that, and is that again something different to residential? Is it a separate niche within that? Sorry,
I'll
2 questions.
start off with the risk element. One risk element is, of course, the operational risk. So you need your operator, and similar like if you look at a hotel chain, you need the other element is development risk, and I think if you look at fund offerings right now, they can not only reflect the risk of standing investments, but let's say development or redevelopment risk. So that
You just mentioned operators. So is that for all of you, for you two, there needs to be a separate operator, or are you going to do the operations?
We are doing the operations because we sought, but it's in our DNA. We do exactly the same for offices and residential, but we sought to be able to increase the value of real estate. We have to be very close with management, of operational management. So we decided to create from scratch a company to do that.
There was another question that's more.
Yeah, I think what sort of the demographic profile of so a number of 18-year-olds coming through the education system over the next sort of 10 years or so. That is there's going to be the sort of explosion from the certainly sort of South America that are going to be looking, and Far East who are going to be looking to study, particularly sort of in the English-speaking countries, and then in those countries where sort of more courses are going to be sort of taught, which obviously we're seeing more in Netherlands, more in Italy and Germany certainly, and I think those were likely to expand. And then coupled with on the residential side, what we're seeing in the UK is the development of student housing has actually, we're trying to sort of take students out of residential, out of the residential sector into purpose-built student halls and residences. So that releases the residences back to the private rental market.
So concerning risk and return, one of the slides I had to take out for Sweden shows, since we have there 15 years, that actually the risk for student housing in Sweden is higher than for residential, but also the return is higher. So of course, if you approximate risk by volatility, you see, if you compare residential and student housing, the issue that Matthias mentioned, yes, you have a high return, but it's connected with a certain higher risk due to higher volatility. But for the Swedish market, for example, office has the same risk, the same volatility, but far lower return than student housing. So in that respect, if you have a snapshot of 15 years, you see at least for the last 15 years, student housing was a good bet, but with a higher volatility.
Questions? Wait,
Thomas Lindenberg. I'm working for the OED Housing Office Austria, and we provide we accommodate 13,000 international students per year in Austria. And I need to agree with you, the diversity is most important for us, because we could see the last year everybody wanted to live in a single apartment, but it's changing now. More and more double rooms are students are asking for double rooms because they cannot afford single apartments anymore. So we need a wide range of everything, from the double room to the single apartment and living communities.
And schools are asking for that now.
Schools are asking for
Yeah.
the double rooms?
Yep, double or triple
Double.
rooms in
Diversity.
order to have their students, first year students, for example,
Okay.
as a group, as a new community inside the housing.
And you know, that's where the demand for the sector is coming from, or the investor appetite is, because much of that can't actually be provided for in the current student hall provision. You know, they're probably sort of inefficient to run. They don't meet the needs of the modern day student, and therefore the investor wants to get on the back of that to develop that accommodation.
Somebody in the back there.
Thank you. Philip Hillman from Jones Lang LaSalle. A comment, really, an observation for the panel, which would be great if they could comment on. We were talking about transparency in the student housing sector in Europe, and some concerns expressed by Matthias, for example, about there's not very much evidence out there yet, and IPD also commenting on the lack of real deals on which to base your valuations. From 1992, when the private sector really got stuck into the UK student housing market, until about 2005, there were virtually no deals done. The only deals were sales of land to developers, and on the whole, those developers were building up their portfolios. So we had 10 years nearly when there were no real deals, and us valuers were trying to guess merrily what on earth the right yield should be, what the right running costs were. With hindsight, you think, goodness me, how did we get away with that? Looking forward in Europe, you're going to have this period as well, where there's going to be many years without transactions. That's part of your risk-reward balance. I don't think it'll take the 10 years it took the UK, because it is a global asset class, and so it'll be an accelerated growth, I think, for you going forwards. But I just, I don't think people should assume that there will be transparency straight away.
Could you help us a little bit, and knowing where we are, how would you approach the valuation of this product?
I'd be comparing it with other asset classes with similar characteristics.
Hotels?
In the jurisdictions, hotels, looking at alternative investments generally, healthcare, how investors are looking at healthcare. The running costs question is a key one, because we've been getting that wrong for 15, 20 years in the UK. And right now there is huge disparity amongst the leading valuers as to what real running costs should be.
Okay.
And there are different views on whether there should be portfolio premiums or not. For a sector that is supposedly a major asset class, we're still learning.
I think we do agree that it's really difficult for this kind of real estate objects coming out of this kind of niche market. And of course you have to find the valuers who try to do the best with the information available. But it's frequently the case. I mean, for healthcare, where investors are active, in the US, there's a prison REIT, and of course for a prison it's difficult to have good data for valuations. So I think you always have this challenge if you sort of move away from this kind of classical investments, markets, office, retail, residential. Question?
Yeah. So it's not really a question, more like an observation in relation to what's been talked about.
You can end it in a question.
Right, okay, I will do that.
Do you agree? Yes.
I think it's challenging to compare return profiles across markets in Europe, predominantly because the commercial complexity of what goes on in the UK as a market that's very well developed is completely different to what is the case in Holland, Sweden, or Spain, for that matter. UK, you've got lease structures in place with universities that supports a transaction that subsequently feeds into the return you show in your slides, and that's unlikely to happen in Europe for the foreseeable future. Similarly, in Spain, it's a place where you won't own the land that you build on, so you're up against leasehold structures where you may have the rights to own and operate for 50 years. So again, it's difficult to talk about returns and then compare them across jurisdictions in Europe.
Okay. Another question?
I could add something there.
Don't you agree? You don't agree. He doesn't agree. So
I
go
don't
ahead.
agree, because ultimately the investor is looking, I'm investing €1 and what's my return on it? So yes, ultimately the return figure is reflecting the amount of risk an investor is taking.
And I think you brought up the exit.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Who is going to buy it from you? Does anybody know the answer?
But concerning this kind of aspect of globalization, for example, in the 1970s, the typical British insurance company had 90% of the equities of the shares still invested within the UK. And now it's the other way around. They only have probably 10% invested in UK shares, and they are totally globalized with the shares investment. But with residential, real estate, we are still so at the beginning of this kind of globalization or urbanization. So I think it will definitely go in that direction, that you will invest far more abroad as a pension fund, as an insurance company, and for that you have to be aware. You have to be aware of these changes, the differences in the different lease structures, but you have to make this a step with the managers who are there in this location.
What do you tell your board what your exit strategy is? There's the board. Explain it to them. We're going to buy a nice
we have
property.
two options,
Okay.
friends.
Yeah.
We can exit by block or we can exit by units.
Yeah.
And I will be there next year to explain how we will have done at the beginning of 2014, because we are about to sell the first one. Actually, we are valued usually as a residential unit, not student residence. It's a residential unit. So the two stories can be okay. I sell it by block to an institutional, to whatever. Okay, could work. Or I can use a kind of not a tax scheme, but a tax special French thing again, to sell it by unit, like the developers are doing. And it's one of our pitch. We explain, okay, we are a one-stop shop. We are investor and manager, so we are first hand. The building is first hand. When we will sell it to individuals, as individual investors, we explain that it's like it's like a brand new building. So we will try to have a yield compression on that one and to sell it by unit.
So
it can take times, but we'll try to do that.
But if you do, let's say, this selling by unit, then who's going to manage?
The proposal is we will continue to manage.
Value chain. Different value chain.
No, but you're right. That's why we try to see how we can move the model and to adapt the model to the size of the
I mean,
business.
it's a model that we are seeing in the UK, the fragmentation, which fractional sales. But again, that's very much at the well. There's no second. There's very little retail market beyond where do you sell it to? And I think one thing is about the actual sort of the management of the block, retaining sort of control. Local authorities are very concerned about what happens in 2 years, 3 years time when that management contract may after renewal.
First of all, very concerned about who is the manager, the company who is managing, and then who are the owners. That's true. But if you have explained how you manage, who you are, because you were a block investor, maybe you have a play. You can explain.
Yeah, I think the UK fractional sale market is being distorted by the opportunity to get sort of 10% returns, or guaranteed 10% returns over a 3-year period, and then it actually falls away from there. That's the concern that I think some colleagues of us have about that particular model.
But right now, on the private market, for example, in France, 98% of the student residents are fragmented owners.
Okay, on behalf of my daughter, maybe you can sell it to her at the end of these cycles and then join 2 rooms together. That's her next stage. So the cycle is done, yes. So
Great. Okay.
I'll give her name to you. Are there any more very important questions? Yes, one more.
First, to comment on, I would like to add to the realism of Matthias in the sense of and then see if you agree with that. If you look at the market, I mean, in Europe, like in the United States, applies to Australia and Japan, etc., we have reached more or less what the OECD said, the capacity for students. As 40%, the 50% going to higher education. We don't increase the number of local students going to higher education in the future. So probably for demographic reasons, the number is even going down. If you look at the international market, I said, well, we go from 4 million to 7 million, but the competition is going increasingly heavily. China is moving up to probably in 10 years' time to be the #2 in international students attraction. I was last week in Malaysia. They are attracting the Islamic student population around the world coming to Malaysia, because there you get Islamic education and culture, and you don't get the xenophobia in Europe, and etc. So the competition is there, the numbers are down. As an investor, by that you have, in my view, but I appreciate your opinion, to look very much where is the potential for investing in student housing. It will not be in my view, in Tilburg or Twente, etc., but you have to look at where is the competition.
That's the question.
That's the question.
I agree.
You have to work a little bit harder here on this panel. Why do you agree? Why do you agree?
Because I mean, it's back to the question of doing a proper due diligence, and back to the question is where are the top universities attracting? Because I mean, otherwise we're on the same page.
I think
just assuming that this global inflow of international students to Europe will maintain, I think it's a bit too linear thinking.
Yeah, I think in the years, decades before, it was always within Continental Europe, the state, or let's say the lender or the cities and the university with state money who looked after the residential student housing and built their student housing. And I think that the states and the different governments have less money, and therefore institutional investors are needed because of private money. Therefore, I think there's a gap opening where private money can go to, even if the numbers of states.
Absolutely, and then you look at the age of the original state-developed schemes and the condition that they're in at the moment, they can't afford to. And that's what it is. Yeah,
That's where it changes up.
Absolutely.
Buy cheap.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Buy cheap, refurb, reposition rent.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Why don't we do that all? That's one more question, yeah. It has to be a very important question. So, oof, yeah, that's,
well, for sure it is.
You hold us back from lunch, so make sure that.
I've been listening to this very interesting conversation, but what I still do not understand is what is, from the perspective of investing in stone and concrete and wooden frames, the difference between student housing and just young people housing. Why is it interesting, and what's the benefit of focusing on such a
But maybe we aren't even doing that. But
well, the main difference is that you have a natural end to the lease, which is when the...
Okay, that's a good point.
So...
the lease ends.
Yeah, and when you leave university or your education, the lease ends.
In my time, you could be a student for 24 years, but that's over.
I missed that one.
Yeah. Great social life, though. Is that the right
I think yeah, and it's service provision as well. I mean, you're getting these young kids into student halls of residence that may be going away from home for the first time, that need their hand holding, that sort of arm around them if for whatever reason something goes wrong. Whereas if you're a young person, you're generally a little more mature, and you're expected to stand on your own 2 feet.
And I think with the student housing, you have this sort of guarantee that either the university or then the parents they pay the rent. So with the young persons, maybe the parents won't pay any more the rents when they're finished already in university.
There's the hidden guarantee, right? Parents, at the end of the day, pay, which is true.
For him, it'll work for young housing.
And I have 3 in Amsterdam. Okay, thank you very much. Can I have applause for the